Do you think fear only exists inside our heads and that it's no more than our imagination? Psychoanalysts might agree with you, and they believe they know where it lurks and how it got there. But can we trust them? And why have they had such a difficult time persuading others that they're right? And are they just interested in sex and violence? Let's find out more. When it was first described, psychoanalysis turned the way we think about fear upside down, and despite more recent skepticism, it remains highly influential. The term was first used by Sigmund Freud in 1886 in a letter to his friend Wilhelm Fleiss, but became better known after the publication of Freud's psychoanalytical theories and methods. These shocked, scandalised and, let's admit it, titillated polite society, mainly because they involved talking a lot about sex and violence. Before we go any further, it's probably important to make a distinction between the terms psyche, as in the psycho bit of the word psychoanalysis, and the brain. The two are not interchangeable and never have been. The psyche is really just a model, a way to describe how we learn from our sensations and perceptions. It's not located anywhere and has no physical form. Instead, it offers up a way of describing what the brain is doing when we talk about things like consciousness, awareness, or self-identity. Freud believed that many psychological disorders and behaviours, such as fear, were caused by unconscious conflicts and repressed memories from childhood, and that understanding and resolving these conflicts would lead to psychological healing. The idea was revolutionary and represented a frustration with the failures and inadequacies of what are called somatic methods. These tended to reduce all forms of mental distress to physical or biological causes. According to Freud's model, the psyche consists of three parts: the id, the ego, and the superego. Each of these serves a specific function when shaping human behaviour, motivation, and personality, and each may have a dramatic and compelling impact on what we fear and how we experience it. Icebergs tend to be the go-to metaphor when experts try to describe the psyche. It's good at implying that a great deal about who we are lies beneath or remains dark and mysterious. So if it's good enough for others, it's probably more than good enough for us. Let's make a start. Here is our psyche, floating innocently on the ocean. But if there's one thing we already know about icebergs, it's that they hide much of themselves beneath the surface. Some of the structure is evident to us. Some can be seen when it is brought to our attention. Some remains hidden from view. Freud claimed that the id was the most primitive part of the psyche, consisting of unconscious drives and impulses that demanded immediate gratification. It operates on what Freud called the pleasure principle. This tries to satisfy basic needs such as hunger, thirst, and sexual desire. Freud believed that the id was present from birth, directing our most basic instincts. He was not really clear about how the id got there in the first place, but let's not dwell on such annoying details. The ego is the part of the psyche that's responsible for chaperoning the id when it comes into contact with the world around us. It operates on the reality principle and tries to balance the needs of the id with the demands of the real world. The ego is responsible for helping us make conscious decisions and is thought to develop during early childhood. The superego is the part of the psyche that represents our ethical standards. It operates on the morality principle. It's responsible for the development of that little voice in our head, our conscience, and our sense of right and wrong. The superego is thought to develop during early childhood through the internalization and interpretation of cultural values and norms. Fear may operate across as well as within each part of this conceptual model. For example, it might be associated only with the id, demand that we avoid pain or hunger. It may exist instead in the ego, giving us the motivation to work out what's possible and what isn't, and perhaps when we look to avoid trouble. It might even be in our superego, helping us come to terms with what is confusing, fearful and uncertain. Together, though, it's claimed that the three offer up physical and cognitive prompts that show as fear, as well as a sophisticated range of other emotional impulses. These regulate what we do when we face immediate threats or tackle ongoing problems. However, and it has to be acknowledged, psychoanalysis has been subject to many criticisms over the years. One of the most common of these is that Freud's model was too dependent on unrepresentative patients, drawn mostly from his own clinical practice. This is a bit like saying that Freud believed the ice in his dry martini worked in exactly the same way and with the same force as a ship-sinking iceberg. His theory was too subjective, or really no better than the workings of his own opinions and imagination. The concepts of id, ego and superego may also be a little too simplistic to capture the breadth of evidence we have available to us today about human behaviour. For example, they can't really work in total isolation from everything else. So many other things have their effects too, and trying to see a distinction between the job done by the three different bits of the psyche becomes so impossible in everyday life that the whole model ends up being a little meaningless. Experts claim that psychoanalysis is what they call deterministic, that it rejects evidence that doesn't follow its own reasoning and reduces all human behaviour to its own peculiarly favoured ideas. Mind you, it's not alone in this, as all other types of science reserve truth to themselves. Indeed, the model prevails and matures, while some of the claims it made in its infancy have been, shall we say, quietly forgotten about. Others have blossomed, particularly those that contribute to our understanding of personal identity and development, talking therapies and self-reflection. Despite the intense and even dismissive criticism it's received over recent decades, psychoanalysis still provides a compelling, if imperfect, description of human experience and highly productive forms of interpretation about the world around us that competing accounts simply can't muster as effectively. It even offers us a specific theory of fear, how our madnesses are formed, and where they hide within us. But perhaps we should save that for another day. What do you think? Are our fears built within us by our own feelings of shame, guilt, or inadequacy? Can we tackle fear by working out how to come to terms with these feelings? And what aspect of fear would you like to know more about? Let us know. And if you've enjoyed this video, give us a like or a share. Subscribe, it's free, and you'll be notified when the channel wants to say something new to you about fear. Until then, don't be afraid and take care. We have nothing to fear but ignorance.